When it comes to blanketing your entire home in super-fast Wi-Fi, there are many options on the market, but Netgear Orbi has been my go-to recommendation for several years now. The latest and greatest version of Orbi, the 860 series, builds on the success of the previous 850 series, which I reviewed early last year, providing what Netgear describe in their press release as unparalleled Wi-Fi performance. Since I did last year's Orbi review video, I've hardly given my Wi-Fi a second thought because I never have to. It's just solid and dependable, working away in the background, ensuring I never have to think about Wi-Fi, internet speed, signal strength, or dead spots, which is the way you want it, really. But then Netgear sent me their brand new RBK 863 kit just before Christmas, and the improvements with this new version come in 3 flavors. Netgear say they've made the Orbi faster, more secure, and with better range than ever before, so I'll look at each of those points in a bit more depth in this video and assess whether I think it's worth upgrading if you have an Orbi system, and stay tuned for a head-to-head test against the previous 850 series to see if that 20% coverage boost holds true. I extensively tested both systems in various locations around my house, garden, and driveway, and input all the numbers into a massive spreadsheet so you don't have to. You'll have noticed that it was the black edition Netgear sent me, which I think looks really nice in matte black and would look great in any ultra-modern home, although I actually think the white ones match the colour scheme in my living room a bit better, and looks do matter because to work best, routers and satellites need to be on show, not tucked away in a cupboard. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below which colour option you would go for. So, what's new? The first big change is one that I can't test unfortunately, but it's the inclusion of a new high-speed 10GB internet port. My current home connection is only 350 meg, so it won't make any difference to me, but if anyone from Virgin Media is watching, I'm always open to a brand deal, wink wink. This 10GB port is up from 2.5 gigs on the 850 series and just 1 gig on the older Wi-Fi 5 models, so it's a welcome upgrade that will enable you to future-proof your home setup and remove the bottleneck for future multi-gig internet connections. Netgear are also bundling in a year's free subscription to their enhanced security service Armor with the 860 series. It activates for you automatically when you set up the kit, and it gives you protection beyond what just a simple router firewall would give you. If I'm honest, I have slightly mixed feelings about Armor being an extra add-on service. It sends me very frequent notifications telling me that it's blocked hacking attempts on my Hikvision security camera, and occasionally tells me it's blocked something on my desktop computer, but I'm not sure if that's anything more than just a basic router firewall protecting me from the usual random port scanning and other background nonsense that's inevitable on the internet, but telling me about it every single time to make the Armor service seem more valuable. Yes, I know I'm being cynical, and to be fair, it does do more than that. It scans every device on your network and any new ones that connect for known vulnerabilities, and it's good knowing that anything really nasty is blocked at router level, so phishing websites and other evil shouldn't get anywhere near my computer or any other devices, even if you do something really silly like click on a spam email link for appendage enlargement therapy. Plus, with smart home gadgets getting ever more popular, you don't want to connect a no-name smart light bulb to your Wi-Fi and it end up becoming a gateway into your entire home network for a hacker, so with Armor Active you can feel a bit safer, although you should still remain vigilant. Probably one of the biggest plus points is that it gives you Bitdefender Total Security, which you can install on all your devices like desktop computers, laptops, tablets and mobile phones. That means that those devices get additional protection and will still be protected to a degree when you're away from home and not connected to your Orbi router. For some people that might be worth a subscription all on its own, and the fact that it's included for free for the first year just makes it even better. But now it's time to talk about the change that got me most excited when Netgear sent me their press release for the 860 series, and that's the new and improved antenna design, which means the 860 series should provide more range and speed compared to the 850. And spoiler alert, I ended up changing an advanced Wi-Fi setting which made quite a difference to the results, so much so that I ended up completely redoing the second test. I was especially interested to see if the new Orbi would provide a stronger signal to the Nest camera that I added at the front of my house recently, as that does get quite a weak signal for some reason. I could of course reposition the satellites in the house, but maybe with the new 860 series and its increased range I might not have to. So I set about putting this claimed range increase to the test in the most accurate and scientific way that I could. I installed Open Speed Test on my Synology NAS, so from any device on my local home network I can test that device's connection speed not across the internet, but directly to and from my NAS. This will give a far more accurate representation of performance than doing an internet speed test, firstly because my home internet connection is limited to 350 meg, whereas the internal speeds within my home network can be up to a gig, and secondly because the speed of the internet is inherently variable, but with much less going on my home network, the results shouldn't be distorted that much. I can just make sure I'm not watching Netflix, downloading any large files, or doing anything else over the internet to distort my results. First off, I tested the speed over a wired connection to the NAS. The maximum possible speed is 1 gigabit, and you can see I'm getting almost that full speed through the Orbi and over the wired network to and from the NAS, which is good to see. I then put together a spreadsheet to record the data transfer to and from the NAS and repeated the test 3 times before taking an average of all 6 readings. I then repeated the test over Wi-Fi from my phone, a 2021 OnePlus Nord, at various locations around my house and garden. It's a 3-story house with the router on the ground floor and a satellite on both the first floor and on the top floor in the converted loft. I also tested at different points around the front of the house, driveway and across the street, as well as at multiple points down my garden, inputting all the results into the spreadsheet. I then swapped over to the brand new 860 series Orbi, positioning the router and both satellites in exactly the same locations and without changing anything else at all on my home network, and repeated all the tests again with the same phone, my 2-year-old OnePlus Nord. To summarise the test with the 850 series, when all 6 results in each location were averaged out and then all those averages were themselves averaged out, I got an average Wi-Fi speed of 279.49 megabits a second and a maximum achieved speed of 651.7 megabits a second. Results with the 860 series were a bit of a mixed bag actually, and certainly less clear-cut than I'd been expecting. In some areas it actually performed worse in my tests than the 850, but do take that with a big pinch of salt because although I did my best to keep the tests consistent, I can't be completely sure that there was nothing else at play. In other tests, the 860 performed much better, so much so that averaging swung the overall result in the newer 860's favour when you look at the percentage speed difference in each location and then average those out, giving you a 28.21% speed increase and a maximum speed achieved across all the tests of 674.4 megabits a second. However, when you average them all out like I did with the 850 series, that average speed is brought down to a tiny bit slower than the 850 at 276.73 megabits a second, which just goes to show that you can sometimes interpret data in whichever way you like to prove whatever point you want to make. The results did confuse me somewhat, and I wanted to make sure I was interpreting them fairly and correctly, so I sent them to someone who has a first-class engineering degree from Oxford University, and he wasn't quite sure either, but he suggested looking at the median and max values for each test, which is certainly helpful for additional context. Either way though, if you take an average of the percentage changes with either method, you get a result of between 23% and 28% faster overall with the newer 860 series. Some of the results I got when a medium distance from an access point were significantly faster with the 860 than with the 850, but in the interests of keeping this review unbiased and impartial, I can't ignore the fact that I achieved nearly 50 megabits at the bottom of my very long garden with the 850 series, but struggled to achieve half that, and usually got far less with the 860 series the following day. But again, take that with a pinch of salt because that might just say more about the variability of Wi-Fi in general rather than any issue with the new antenna design, and maybe my home network wasn't as much of a constant as I thought it would be. I then noticed the 20 and 40 MHz coexistence setting in the advanced Wi-Fi settings, and after reading up on it a bit, I decided to try disabling it to see if it made a difference. Bear in mind that these tests were all done on a different day, but this did make a noticeable difference. Whilst the maximum Wi-Fi speed I achieved on that day was a bit slower, the average of all the maximum speeds in the various locations was a bit higher, 350 versus 310, and the average of the average speeds was now 314 megabits a second versus 276. Where the 860 series was previously 28% faster on average, it was now nearly 109% faster, and the average of the averages was now 12.41% faster rather than nearly 1% slower. So if you decide to buy an 860 series kit, then you might want to consider disabling the 20 and 40 MHz coexistence setting if your speeds are slower than expected, but comment below if you're thinking of doing that and we can discuss the pros and cons. By the way, remember the security camera I mentioned with the weak Wi-Fi signal? Well, after I first switched over to the newer 860 series, I actually experienced more problems with it disconnecting and stuttering than I did with the 850 series. But since disabling that 20 and 40 MHz coexistence setting, anecdotally at least, it seems to be working much better. Having said that, it's still showing as a fairly weak connection in the Orbi app, and it's still insisting on connecting to the router all the way down in the living room, rather than the satellite that's much closer and on the same side of the house. Surely it would get a better signal connecting to the nearby satellite? Anyway. So, although testing the two Orbi systems against each other wasn't quite as plain sailing as I'd expected, it's clear to me that Netgear Orbi is still the best consumer wireless mesh networking option, and it's great that Netgear are continuing to innovate and improve the Orbi lineup. There are still a couple of things I'd change about the Orbi 860 series. Firstly, there's still no outdoor satellite option to buy as an add-on. I loved the outdoor satellite that came as part of the Wi-Fi 5 generation, so it would be great to see Netgear produce an updated Wi-Fi 6 outdoor satellite in the 800 range. You can watch my dedicated video on the older outdoor satellite with the link in the video description. Secondly, I think it's a real shame that there's still no way to prioritize a particular satellite for a device via some sort of advanced setting. I know it does this automatically and usually does a good job, but as an advanced user, and a bit of a control freak, I'd love to be able to override it sometimes. There you are, I'm slightly clutching at straws to find negatives, but there you go, 2 small gripes on an otherwise excellent system. So, should you upgrade? Well, if you've got the previous Gen 850 series, then unless your incoming internet connection is more than 2.5 gigabits a second, or you're having range issues that can't be solved by adding an extra satellite, I'd probably stick with the 850 series, which is still an excellent option, and you can still subscribe to the Armor security service if you want that as an add-on. If, however, you're still only using the Wi-Fi router that your ISP gives you for free and you want to upgrade to the best of the best, I'd definitely recommend the Orbi without hesitation, and there are purchasing links in the video description. If you don't have a Netgear Orbi system at home, then you really are missing out, and they're not paying me to say that. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences, whether that's with Orbi or any other Wi-Fi system, so have a jolly on down to the comments section, which you'll find just past the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to watch my older videos on the 850 series or the outdoor satellite, then they're on screen for you now.